I used to think being a good father meant staying in the background when necessary, doing what needed to be done quietly, without a round of applause or a pat on the back. When my ex-wife and I split up, my daughter was only 9. I remember the way she clung to her mother's side in court, the way her eyes flicked to me only once, confused and scared. I didn't blame her. Divorce is cruel to kids, even when the adults pretend to be civil. Her mother got primary custody, and I agreed to it. Not because I didn't want to raise my daughter, but because the courts favored her, and honestly, I thought keeping things stable for my daughter was more important than fighting tooth and nail to prove something. I figured if I kept my end of the deal, paid child support, helped with school fees, showed up for birthdays, stayed available, she would grow up knowing I loved her, no matter what. But love, it turns out, doesn't always speak louder than lies. Her name is Maya, my daughter. Beautiful, bright, headstrong, just like her mother, though I'd never say that out loud anymore. I watched her grow up through fragmented weekends and shared holidays, text messages that sometimes went unanswered, and the occasional awkward dinner where I could feel her walls up before we even looked at the menu. I kept telling myself she'd come around, that one day, she'd see the full picture. But there's something insidious about the slow poison of influence. When someone you trust whispers half-truths in your ear for years, it starts to feel like gospel. Her mother never outright blocked me from her life, but she didn't have to. She just told a different version of reality every time I wasn't in the room. And I wasn't in the room often enough to undo it. The day of her graduation, I arrived early. I wore the navy blue suit Maya helped me pick out 2 years earlier for a work event, back when she still called me sometimes to ask for advice, or just to talk. I brought a bouquet of sunflowers because they were her favorite when she was 13. I had them wrapped in that soft brown paper she always said made them look more expensive. I even ironed my shirt twice, like that would somehow iron out all the wrinkles in our relationship. As the ceremony started, I kept scanning the crowd for her. When I finally saw her in that cap and gown, smiling and laughing with her friends, something in me melted a little. I thought, maybe today is the day she remembers I was always here. Maybe today, she lets me in again. The moment she stepped up to the podium for her speech, I held my breath. I didn't expect her to mention me. I certainly didn't think I'd get a thank you. But what I heard instead made the room tilt sideways. "I want to thank the man who truly helped me through school," she said, and my heart actually lifted, until she continued. "My stepdad. He's the one who showed up. My biological dad never provided for me, but he's here to pretend he's happy for me anyway." There was a pause, then polite clapping. My ears rang like a fire alarm. I sat there, frozen, still holding the sunflowers like a fool. A few people turned to look at me. I looked down at my lap, afraid to meet their eyes. Pretending? I had been paying for her tuition since middle school. I'd wired thousands every year, never missed a month of child support, never said no to a school trip or a textbook or a new laptop. And now, in front of all her friends, her classmates, teachers, and family, she said I never provided. Like I was just some ghost who showed up for the photos. I didn't go to the dinner afterward. I left the flowers on her chair and walked straight to my car. I sat there for a long time, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. I couldn't even bring myself to cry. I just kept replaying her words in my head, like a cruel remix on loop. I don't know what hurt more, what she said, or how confidently she said it. Like it was a fact, not an opinion. Like it was her truth, shaped and molded by someone who had spent years crafting a version of me I didn't recognize. And I knew exactly who that someone was. Her mother. The woman I once loved, once trusted, once built a life with. She had been whispering in Maya's ear for years, and this was the result. A daughter who thought her father was a fraud. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled up my bank statements, scrolling through years of payments. Monthly transfers labeled Maya's tuition, lump sums for school trips, the down payment for her senior year dorm, the emergency transfer when her laptop broke. I compiled them all into a PDF folder and added one note at the top, just in case you ever wonder who was pretending. I didn't send it right away. I stared at the email draft for hours. I didn't want to lash out at her. She was still my daughter. But something inside me had shifted. There's only so much mischaracterization a man can take before he starts rewriting his own role in the story. I wasn't the absent father she described. I had never been. And now, I was done being quiet about it. The next morning, I hit send. She called me around noon. Her voice was shaking, not angry, not defensive, just lost. "Dad?" she said, and there was a long pause after that. The kind of silence that feels like it's traveling across decades, not just seconds. "I got your email." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I wanted her to sit in the truth for a moment, to let those receipts, those cold, hard numbers, settle in her gut the same way her words had landed in mine the night before. "I didn't know," she said finally. "I swear, I didn't know you paid for any of that." She sounded like a child again, even though she was 21 now. But in that moment, I didn't hear a grown woman. I heard the little girl who used to braid her doll's hair on my living room floor and ask me to taste her invisible tea. That girl had been hidden under years of resentment she never built herself. And I had let her mother plant every seed. I took a deep breath. "What did your mother tell you, Maya?" I asked, my voice low, even controlled. Because if I let the anger creep in now, she'd shut down. She'd think I was just trying to make her pick sides. But this wasn't about sides. This was about the truth. She hesitated, and then the dam broke. "She told me you didn't care, that you moved on with your new life, that you had money but chose not to help because you were selfish. She said every time I needed something, she had to beg you for it, and that most of the time, you refused." Her words came fast, tumbling over each other, guilt riding on every syllable. "She said you only showed up for photo ops, that you liked playing the part of a father, but never wanted the responsibility." I closed my eyes, the weight of those lies pressing against my chest like a lead blanket. I could picture my ex-wife so clearly, sitting at the kitchen table with Maya, saying those things with a rehearsed sadness in her voice. I always knew she was bitter about the divorce. She hated that I walked away clean, that I didn't fight, that I didn't come crawling back. She hated that I rebuilt my life, quietly, without needing her approval or forgiveness. But I never thought she'd take that bitterness and aim it at our daughter like a weapon. And yet, that's exactly what she did. Year after year, conversation after conversation, until Maya believed she had been abandoned. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't know how much you did. I really thought you didn't want me. I didn't want to be cruel, but I couldn't let her off the hook entirely." "You could have asked," I said gently. "You could have called. You could have asked me why I wasn't there more. Why I didn't pay for things." You believed everything she said without ever checking. She let out a small, broken noise. I was angry. And it was easier to believe you didn't care than to think she might be lying. There it was. The admission. The raw, ugly core of it. Sometimes, when people are hurting, they choose the version of the story that hurts less, even if it means turning someone into a villain who never deserved it. I sighed, not because I was tired, but because I finally understood. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness didn't mean things would go back to the way they were. In fact, that was the moment everything changed. I never sent another dime to her mother again. Not a single transfer. From that day on, I dealt with Maya directly. Tuition, rent, groceries, clothes, whatever she needed, she came to me, and I gave it to her without going through the woman who had rewritten my history. Maya was stunned at first. "Mom said you'd never send me money unless she asked for it," she told me one afternoon. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "That's because she made herself the gatekeeper," I said. "She needed to control the narrative and the money. And once I took that control back, the cracks started to show in her perfect little world." It didn't take long for the consequences to arrive. Within 3 months, the calls started coming in, not from Maya, but from mutual acquaintances. Her mother and her husband had lost their business. Their main investor pulled out. The store closed down. The savings dried up. They were struggling. I didn't gloat, at least not out loud. But I didn't lift a finger to help, either. That woman had spent over a decade painting me as an uncaring deadbeat, poisoning my daughter against me while cashing every check I sent like clockwork. And now, she was reaping what she sowed. Maya called me one evening in late July. "Did you hear about Mom?" she asked, sounding more curious than upset. I said I had. She hesitated before continuing. "Did you have anything to do with it?" That was the moment I knew she was starting to understand the full picture, not just who I was, but who her mother had been this whole time. I didn't answer the question directly. I just said, people get what they earn. That includes good things and bad. A week later, my ex-wife called me. First time in years. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was long, rambling, full of half apologies and wounded pride. She said things were hard. She said she was sorry for the misunderstandings. She said Maya was confused and that we all needed to come together for her sake. Not once did she admit to the lies. Not once did she say, "I'm sorry for what I told her about you." That's how I knew it wasn't real remorse. It was survival. She had used me as a punching bag for years, and now that she had no money and no control over Maya, she wanted to pivot, to rewrite the story again, this time with her as the humbled victim, just trying to make peace. But I didn't even care. The first time Maya showed up at my place after the graduation debacle, she didn't even knock. She used the spare key I gave her back in high school, the one she had probably forgotten existed until guilt forced her memory to work overtime. I was sitting on the couch, drinking coffee, trying to decide if I had the stomach to listen to her mother's voicemail one more time. The door creaked open and there she was, my daughter, standing in the doorway like a stranger who'd just remembered where she belonged. She had that nervous smile, the one she used to wear when she wanted something, but this time it was mixed with something else. Shame, maybe. Regret. A kind of sadness that wasn't just about me. It was about the years she couldn't get back. She didn't say anything right away. Just walked in, sat across from me, and stared at her own hands like they might hold the answers. I let the silence sit for a moment, heavy and honest. I wanted her to speak first. When she finally did, her voice was low. "I feel like I don't know anything anymore," she said. "I don't know what's real and what's just what I was told." I nodded. That's how betrayal works. It doesn't just hurt in the moment. It destabilizes everything. It makes you question your memories, your loyalties, your entire sense of history. I didn't want to twist the knife, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat things either. "That's because you were fed a story for a long time," I said, "and you didn't have the tools to know it was fiction." She winced, but didn't argue. That was new. For years, our conversations had been laced with subtle barbs, defensiveness, passive resistance. But now, she was listening. Really listening. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked. "Why didn't you say something when I pushed you away? When I accused you of not caring?" That question landed like a punch. I leaned back, staring past her for a second before answering. "Because I didn't want to be the guy who made you choose. I thought if I stayed steady, kept paying, kept showing up, you'd figure it out on your own. I didn't want to drag your mother through the mud, even when she was burying me in it." Maya exhaled, long and slow. "I think I hate her a little bit right now," she said. Her voice cracked on the word hate, and I flinched. I didn't want that, either. No matter what her mother did, I knew what holding on to hate would do to Maya in the long run. "Don't hate her," I said, "but don't forget either. There's a difference." I stood up, grabbed a folder from my bookshelf, and handed it to her. Inside were hard copies of everything I'd sent her over email, bank statements, tuition confirmations, screenshots of messages asking about school supplies and rent payments. "These are yours now," I said, "in case you ever need to remind yourself what's real." She looked through the papers like they were pages of a lost diary. I watched her eyes scan line after line, watched the disbelief melt into quiet understanding. "You've been doing all this the whole time," she whispered. "And she took the credit?" I shrugged. "She didn't just take the credit, Maya. She rewrote the narrative. She made herself the martyr and me the villain. And you believed her because you loved her. That's not your fault. But it's time you start seeing things as they are." Maya nodded, but I could see the conflict in her face. This was the woman who raised her, after all. The woman who packed her lunches, helped her with homework, and held her through breakups. But it was also the same woman who weaponized her love and trust to hurt someone else. Over the next few weeks, something in our dynamic shifted. Maya started calling more, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to ask about money directly. And each time, I made sure it went straight to her account. No more detours through her mother's hands. I taught her how to budget, how to track expenses, how to invest small amounts. I treated her like an adult, and she responded in kind. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. She even started asking questions about the past. Was it true that Mom refused your visitation weekends sometimes? She asked one night over dinner. I gave her a sad smile. More than sometimes, I said. But I didn't fight her. I thought being quiet was the better option. I thought protecting your peace was more important than defending my pride. That dinner was the last time she mentioned her mother for a while. I think she needed space to process it all. And I gave her that. But what I didn't give, what I refused to give, was another sent to the woman who had twisted my daughter's heart against me. And that decision, more than anything else, sent a ripple through the delicate structure her mother had built. Without my money coming in, her mother and her new husband struggled. It started small, late payments, budget cuts, canceled vacations. Then it spiraled. I didn't gloat, but I did watch. I saw the foreclosure notice on their storefront online. I heard through a mutual friend that their business partner backed out unexpectedly. And when I got wind of a potential investment deal they were banking on, I made a few calls. Quiet, subtle, nothing overt, but just enough to put a cold breeze where there used to be a welcome. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. It's best served methodically, with precision, clarity, and the kind of restraint that makes your silence scarier than any outburst. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show up at their door. I simply pulled the rug out from under them the way she had pulled my daughter from me. And when she called again, this time sobbing, pleading, saying she didn't know how things got so bad, I saved the voicemail. Not to use it, just to remember. Because that voice, trembling and desperate, was the same voice that told Maya I didn't love her. And I wasn't about to forget that. There's something strange about watching someone fall apart from a distance, especially when that someone used to hold so much power over you. You don't cheer. You don't smirk. It's quieter than that. It's like watching the tide finally pull away from a sandcastle built too close to the shore. You just stand there, knowing the collapse was inevitable. That's how it felt, watching my ex-wife unravel. I wasn't orchestrating every failure, but I wasn't stopping them either. And after everything she did, after every lie, every manipulation, every calculated attempt to erase me from my daughter's heart, I didn't know her a damn thing. Maya, for her part, stayed mostly quiet about her mother's troubles. I think she didn't know how to reconcile the woman she had defended for years with the one who had lied to her so convincingly. That confusion made her careful with her words, especially around me. But she didn't defend her mother anymore. She didn't make excuses. She asked questions instead. She wanted to understand the timeline, the decisions, the silences. I answered everything honestly, without bitterness, without guilt. Just facts. I think that honesty startled her at first. She was used to shadows and half-truths, and I had no interest in continuing that pattern. The more she asked, the more she began to see. And the more she saw, the further she stepped away from the woman who had raised her but never trusted her with the truth. I remember the first time Maya told me she was transferring her phone plan off her mother's account. It was such a small thing, on the surface. But to me, it felt like a declaration of independence. She said it casually over lunch, stirring her iced tea with the straw like it wasn't a big deal. I think I'm going to switch to my own plan, she said. Feels weird still being tied to her money when you've been helping me so much. I didn't react much at the time, just nodded and said, whatever makes you feel more in control. But later that night, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the empty space where her baby photos used to hang, and I realized how far we'd come. Not back to what we used to be. Maybe we'd never get there, but somewhere new, somewhere honest. Her mother, meanwhile, was slipping. One failed investment turned into two. The boutique she ran with her husband, some overpriced blend of yoga gear and conscious living products, shut down without ceremony. Rumor had it she tried to pivot to online sales, but with no real customer base and no savings left, it didn't take. A mutual friend from our old neighborhood texted me out of the blue. Did you hear about Claire? Things are bad. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I knew? That I didn't care? That some part of me felt vindicated every time I passed the shuttered storefront on Maple and 8th? Because I did. I felt vindicated as hell. One evening, Maya came over with takeout. Her idea, not mine. She was trying to build something between us again, and I let her. We sat on the couch, watching some forgettable movie, when she paused it suddenly and turned to me. Did you ever love her? she asked. I knew she meant her mother. I put the remote down slowly. That wasn't a casual question. It came from a place of real curiosity, maybe even grief. Once, I said, before things got ugly, before she started resenting me for not being the version of a husband she imagined. Maya didn't flinch. Did she always hate you after the divorce? I thought about that for a moment. She hated that I didn't need her, I said, and that I refused to fight with her. She wanted a war. I gave her silence. That made her furious. Maya nodded, her eyes heavy with thought. She used to tell me you were dangerous, that you'd ruin everything if she let you back in. I almost laughed, half from disbelief, half from recognition. She said the same thing in court, I replied. Used my ambition as evidence that I couldn't be trusted with emotional things. Said I was calculating. Maybe I am. But you're here, aren't you? Maya smiled faintly, but there was pain behind it. I just wish I had asked questions earlier. I could have had so much more time with you. That nearly broke me. Because for all my restraint, all my strategy, all my cold resolve, there was still a man in me who had missed his daughter every day she pulled away. I wish I could say her mother took the fall with grace. But people like her don't know how to land. They claw on the way down, grab at whoever's closest. She tried to guilt Maya next. Told her she was ungrateful, that I was poisoning her against her own blood. Maya showed me the messages one night. Long, rambling texts laced with desperation and blame. She's losing it, she said. She wants me to move back in, says I owe her loyalty. I didn't say what I really thought. That loyalty, when forced, isn't loyalty at all. Instead, I told her, do what feels right for you. But remember what she did when she thought I'd never speak up. Maya didn't reply. She just turned her phone face down and leaned her head on my shoulder. And then came the night Claire, the woman I once married, the woman who lied to our daughter for years, called me crying. Truly crying. Not manipulative sobs, not performative pain. Real anguish. She said everything was gone. Their house, their savings, the car. The yoga studio lease defaulted. Her husband had left to stay with his brother, and she was alone. I messed up, she said over and over. I should have never lied to her. I should have never pushed you away. I listened. I didn't interrupt. And when she asked, can we fix this? I answered simply, no. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, you don't mean that. I did. I meant it with everything I had. She had poisoned the most sacred bond one had, my connection to my daughter. That wasn't something you patched over with apologies. After I hung up, I saved the voicemail like I had the others. Not out of spite, out of preservation. I wanted to remember the sound of her realizing she had lost everything. Not because someone took it from her, but because she threw it all away. I didn't tell Maya everything I had done to make the fall swifter. Some things were better left unsaid, especially when they were done in silence, not malice. It wasn't like I pulled strings to destroy her mother's life. No, that would have been too clean, too cinematic. What I did was much simpler. I stopped protecting her. I stopped making the calls I used to make, the quiet nudges to people in my network to give her leeway, grant her extensions, offer her second chances she didn't deserve. I had done it for years, not because I owed her anything, but because I didn't want Maya to suffer from the fallout. But after that graduation speech, after those words sliced through me in front of everyone, I realized that protecting her was just another form of enabling. So I stepped back, and I let the truth catch up to her. And the truth didn't knock. It kicked the door in. The first major public fallout happened about 4 months after Maya's graduation. Her mother and stepfather had been running a shady little investment club, promising high returns on eco-conscious startups. It was all buzzwords and bullshit, but people bought in because they dressed it up in self-help and spiritual affirmations. I knew one of the investors, an old friend from college who reached out to me when things started to smell off. You know Claire, right? He asked. She and her husband pitched us this sustainable beauty brand, but the numbers aren't adding up. I figured if anyone would know if this was real, it'd be you. That was my moment. I could have played dumb. I could have stayed quiet. But I didn't. I told him what I knew. Not just about the brand, but about the woman running it. I gave facts, not feelings. The kind that hold up in court. He didn't say much, just thanked me. 2 weeks later, the entire scheme unraveled. Lawsuits were filed. Assets frozen. Her name was dragged in local business forums, then local press. A journalist called me for comment, and I declined, but I didn't stop it either. I let the narrative write itself. And when Maya brought it up over dinner, "Did you hear about the investor thing?" I just nodded. "People make bad decisions when they think they'll never be held accountable," I said. She didn't press me, but I saw the way her eyes narrowed, the way her mouth twitched like she knew there was more to the story. That was the night she told me she blocked her mother's number. "She kept sending me voice notes," she said, scrolling through her phone, "accusing me of choosing you over her, telling me I'm cold, disloyal, like I'm supposed to fix everything now." She paused, her thumb hovering over one particular message. "You want to hear it?" I shook my head. "No need," I said. I've heard all her lines before. Maya stared at me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I blocked her this morning. I can't take it anymore." I wanted to say something, comforting, affirming, but I didn't. Because this was her choice, her line in the sand. And I knew it came with a pain I couldn't ease. The next week, Claire showed up at my office. She didn't have an appointment. She just appeared in the lobby, thinner than I remembered, shoulders hunched like she'd aged a decade in 6 months. My assistant, God bless her, looked like she wanted to call security. But I told her it was fine. Claire walked in, eyes red, holding a folder like it was a peace treaty. She sat across from me and launched into a speech I'd heard rehearsed a dozen different ways in my head. "I never meant to push her away," she said. "I just didn't want her to idolize you. I was scared she'd leave me behind." There it was, the real motive, hidden under all the manipulation. Fear. She hadn't hated me because I was absent. She hated me because I didn't need her to function. And she feared the day Maya would realize that too. "You lied to her," I said flatly. "For years. You didn't just bend the truth. You constructed an entire identity for me that was false. And you kept cashing the checks the whole time." She opened the folder then. Inside were letters. Handwritten ones. Apologies, maybe. Or explanations. I didn't touch them. "I was wrong," she said. "I know that now. I lost everything. Please, just help me get back on my feet." It was laughable, really. The woman who'd spent years painting me as a villain was now asking me to be her savior. I stood up, walked to the door, and held it open. "I think we're done here, Claire." She didn't move right away. Her voice cracked when she spoke again. "You're going to let me drown?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "You made sure I drowned in my daughter's eyes for over a decade. You're lucky I'm not doing worse." And then I walked away. That confrontation cracked something open in me. Not hate, not even satisfaction. Just a quiet finality. The chapter was closed. I wasn't angry anymore. Not the way I used to be. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her ruined. I just wanted distance. Boundaries. Space where her chaos couldn't reach me. And for the first time in a long time, I had that. I went home that night and found Maya already waiting for me on the porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, 2 coffees on the step beside her. She looked up and said, "She came to my place, too." I didn't let her in. I sat beside her in silence for a while. The night was cool, and the city buzzed in the background. "I used to think she was the strongest person I knew," Maya said quietly. "But now I think she was just the loudest." I nodded. Loud people fool us into thinking they're right. Quiet people usually just know they are. She laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "You're the quiet one." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because for once, the silence was enough. It had been 6 months since Maya's graduation, and in that time, my life had grown quieter, but not empty. There's a difference. The quiet that followed wasn't the kind that comes from isolation or bitterness. It was the kind that arrives after a storm, when the branches stop swaying and the sky stops rumbling, and, for the first time in years, you can hear yourself think. I spent more time with Maya now, though not in the forced, guilt-driven way it used to be. We had dinner every Sunday, rotating who cooked. Sometimes we watched old movies. Sometimes we said nothing at all. But the silence no longer had that old tension. It felt earned, respected, even comforting. And for the first time since she was a child, I felt like I actually knew my daughter. Not the version shaped by weekends and shared custody, but the woman she was becoming. One Sunday afternoon, we were sitting in my backyard. I'd planted a small herb garden out there a few years ago, something to keep my hands busy when work slowed down. Maya was crouched beside the basil plant, brushing her fingers over the leaves like she was memorizing the texture. You know, she said, not looking at me. I think I used to hate you for no reason. I didn't say anything. I just let her speak. I convinced myself it made sense, hating you. It made things simpler. If I believed you didn't care, I didn't have to feel the disappointment every time you missed something. But now I know you never actually missed anything. I just wasn't told you were there. That hit harder than anything she'd said in the past 6 months. Because it was true. I had shown up, just never in the frame her mother allowed her to see. I had been edited out of my own fatherhood. And now, years later, my daughter was finally seeing the director's cut. I don't blame you for being angry, I said quietly. But I'm glad you see it now. That's all I ever wanted, for you to see the truth. She finally looked at me, her eyes soft but tired. She keeps trying, she said. Texts, emails, calls from random numbers. She even wrote me a letter, begged me to come visit, said she was sick and broken and all alone. I read it, and for a second, I felt something. Then I remembered how many times she let me cry over you, thinking you didn't care, and I just couldn't bring myself to reply. I leaned back in my chair, the sun dipping behind the neighbor's roof. You don't owe her anything, Maya. Forgiveness is yours to give, not hers to demand. She nodded, but I could tell the weight of it was still pressing on her. Even when people betray us, their absence can feel like grief. And that grief doesn't vanish just because they earned their exile. I want to forgive her, she said. I really do. But every time I try, I hear her voice in my head, telling me you never loved me. And then I see your bank statements, your emails, your texts I never got. I don't know how to forgive someone who let me believe I was unwanted. I stood up and walked over to her. Not because I had some sage advice, but because sometimes the most fatherly thing you can do is just stand beside your kid when the world feels too heavy. You don't have to forgive her yet, I said. Or ever, if that's what you need. What matters is that you're finally living your life from a place of truth, not manipulation. She looked up at me, blinking back tears she didn't bother hiding anymore. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. That's the cruel part of clarity. It often arrives too late to salvage the time you lost. But it's still better than never seeing the light at all. Later that week, I got another voicemail from Claire. Her voice was hoarse, maybe from crying, maybe from smoke. I didn't know, and I didn't care enough to ask. She said she'd lost the apartment. Said her sister wouldn't take her in. That Maya had turned cold. That karma had eaten her alive. I was wrong, she admitted. I know that now. I was just scared. I didn't want to be forgotten. I didn't want her to love you more than she loved me. I listened to it twice. Not because I wanted to, but because part of me needed to hear her say it out loud. The truth. Not wrapped in manipulation or bitterness, but stripped bare. She had never wanted to hurt Maya directly. She just wanted to be the hero in her story. And when I wouldn't play the villain, she wrote me into that role anyway. I deleted the voicemail after that. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed her words to justify how I felt. I didn't need reminders of what she'd done, because the consequences were already in motion, and she was living in them every day. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even satisfied. I was simply done. And that, more than any revenge or confrontation, was the closure I never thought I'd have. Maya eventually visited her mother, not to reconcile, but to say goodbye. She told me about it afterward, how her mother cried the entire time, how she kept asking what she could do to fix it. I told her nothing, Maya said. Because there's nothing left to fix. I'm not mad. I'm not hurt. I'm just done. I hugged her for a long time after that. Not as an apology, and not for comfort. Just because I could. Just because she let me again. The last Sunday dinner we had before Maya moved to a new city for grad school, she handed me a photo. It was one of us at her middle school science fair, me kneeling beside her volcano project, both of us smiling like time hadn't yet split us apart. I found this in a box Mom kept, she said. She had pictures of you. All of them. She just never showed me. I held the photo in my hands, my fingers tracing the edges like it was a relic. She never wanted me to know you were there, Maya continued. But you always were. And now I know that. I smiled, but it wasn't triumphant. It was quiet. Grateful. Whole. You know what matters? I asked. She shook her head. That you found the truth anyway. If you've ever been cast as the villain in someone else's story, you know how painful it is to be misunderstood by the people you love most. But sometimes the truth takes time to reveal itself, and when it does, you don't need revenge. You just need peace. If this story spoke to something real in your life, drop a comment and share your own experience. And if you've ever had to stand firm in your boundaries, let others know they're not alone. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories of family, fallout, and finding your voice. See you soon in the next one.